Hey guys, welcome back to my new episode. This is episode 3 of NSCA CSCS, which is Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, right? So today we'll be learning about the structure of a muscle fiber, right? It's really important for you to know what the muscle is comprised of, right? So here we will be learning the structure of the muscle layer by layer, right? So what you can see here in this diagram, right? This is your muscle, right? And then it has different layers which we need to know, and every layer has certain important roles to play. So let's start from small to big, right? Because that makes it easy for you to understand. Otherwise, you can also go from big to small. But I believe my approach is always from the small to the big, right? So starting with the smallest structure, which is also called as myofilament, we will be discussing this in the next topic or the next episode, which is sliding filament theory. For as of now, let's just skip myofilament. We can move forward to a single muscle fiber, right? So a single muscle fiber is actually cylindrical in shape, right? If you uh, ever eaten chicken, right? What you do is you just shred it and then it comes out like a thread, right? So a muscle fiber is a cylindrical structure. It has cylindrical structure which is round, right? And then it is wrapped by a layer, and that layer is called as endomysium, which you can see it here, right, between muscle fibers. So this is your single muscle fibers wrapped by a layer, and that layer is called as endomysium, right? So what you do is you take all these muscle fibers, right? So there are hundreds or maybe thousands or even more muscle fibers wrapped together, right? Something like this, wrapped together in a bundle, and this bundle is called as fascicle, which you can see it here, right? So there are multiple muscle fibers wrapped in a bundle, and this bundle is also can also be called as a fascicle, right? So fascicle is nothing but muscle fibers wrapped in a bundle, and this fascicle also is wrapped in a layer, and this layer is called as a perimysium, which you can see it here, right? So again, you start with muscle fibers, then hundred or maybe thousands or even more muscle fibers wrapped in a bundle, and that bundle is called fascicle. Fascicle is also wrapped with a layer, a protective layer. That's a layer which has certain important role to play, and that's called perimysium, right? So now what you see, all these fascicles, right? You've got a lot of bundles put together, and that comprises your muscle, right? So muscle will have a lot of fascicles. A fascicle will have a lot of muscle fibers and a muscle fiber will have a lot of myofilaments, right? So we'll not talk about myofilament at this moment. What you understand, starting from the small, which is your muscle fiber, right? With an outer layer. That outer layer is called endomysium. All these muscle fiber put together in a bundle. That bundle is called fascicle. This fascicle also has a layer above, and that layer is called perimysium. And then all these fascicle put together, and that's how your muscle looks like, right? So, and this entire muscle also has a layer over it, and that layer is called as epimysium, right? So this is how your muscle structure looks like, right? So going further, what you see here, right? So if you see hierarchy wise, right, what you see here is your skeletal muscle actually helps uh, sorry, your muscle is actually attached to the bones through your tendon, right? And the tendon is basically a cord-like structure which helps attach the muscle to the bone. It is quite strong. The problem with it, it lacks blood supply, right? So if you start from the hierarchical structure, which is from the top big to the small, what you see is a muscle, right? Muscle has a lot of fascicles, bundles, right? And those bundles will have a lot of muscle fibers, right? And these muscle fibers will have smaller myofibrils, and these myofibrils will have myofilaments and also sarcomere, right? So what you know about sarcomere is the smallest. I'll say it's the unit of muscle contraction, right? So it's the unit for muscle contraction. I will say structural unit of muscle contraction, right? So when we talk about muscles, we have three category of muscles. One can be your skeletal muscle, which is voluntary in your control. The second can be your heart muscle, which is again voluntary, involuntary, right? And the third is your smooth muscle, which is within the viscera, which is inside your body, and that's involuntary, right? Once you eat, The food just enters and then moves through your digestive system. You have zero control over it, right? But then when it comes to moving an object, you have total control. So skeletal muscles are voluntary, smooth muscles are involuntary. They are they look different, right? When it comes to when we see them under a microscope, right? So if you see the size of your muscle structure, muscle fiber size or cell diameter can be of 50 to 100 micrometer, right? About the diameter of a human hair, right? Which is as small as a human hair, right? But when you see the diameter of a myofibril, which is I will say 1/100 times the diameter. It's really small, much way smaller than a hair is, right? Then you have your myosin filament within your myofibrils, right? If you see that, it's the smallest, right? So it is 1/10,000 the diameter of the hair, right? So if you go by hierarchy, what you see here is the smallest structure found in your skeletal muscle fiber is actin filament, right, which will help you with muscle contraction, which is the thinnest, which is approximately 6 nanometer, right? So again, slightly bigger than that, you have another myofilament that's called myosin, which is almost 1/10,000 the diameter of a hair, right? If you go a little higher in the hierarchy, what you find is the myofibril, which is slightly bigger. Then I'll say it is quite larger than the myosin and the actin. But then if you compare it with the muscle fiber, so now what you start is your muscle fiber will have myofibrils, your myofibril will have myofilament, and your myofilament will be of two types. One is your myosin, which is thick filament, and one is actin, which is thin filament, right? So you go by structural hierarchy, what you see is actin is the smallest, and myosin is slightly bigger than the actin. Then they are basically inside your myosin and your inside your myofibril, and myofibril is inside your muscle fiber, and muscle fiber is inside your fascicle, and fascicles are put together eventually making it into a muscle, right? So this is how your muscle structure looks like. And now if you go layer by layer, right? So now you have your tissue, right? So you have your tissue as epimysium, which is the outer layer, right, which covers the entire muscle, right? The function is to protect and give shape to the muscle, right? And also separate muscles from the surrounding tissue, which is important for the muscle to be protected, right? It's a tough sheet, right? It's tough, right? And it's around all the muscles, right? So now you go to the next entity, which is your tissue, which is your perimysium, which is the middle layer of which is located at the middle layer. What you see is the perimysium covers the fascicles, right, which holds the muscle fibers, right? So what it does basically, perimysium does is basically it groups the muscle fiber into small sections and carry blood vessels and nerve cells, right? Two important work. One is blood supply and the other is nerve signal. Okay, and it's like small wrapping packets, right? It's like small packet wrapped into big parcel, right? Then you have your endomysium. So endomysium is basically the innermost layer. It covers each muscle fiber important for nutrient delivery and isolation, separating each muscle fiber from the other, right? It's like a plastic wrap, it's like a plastic wrap that is wrapped around each strand, right, of a spaghetti, for example, right? And then you have one more layer at the top of the muscle, which is white in color, which surrounds each muscle, right? Often called as fascia, right? So this is like every muscle. If you go to buy, I will say, meat in a mutton shop or maybe a meat shop, what you see is muscle has a thin, a whitish layer, right? Something that covers, protects the muscle, right? So that layer basically is called fascia, right? Which is almost onto the muscles, covering the muscle. What it helps is it helps the muscle to move smoothly and stay in place, right? It's like that cling film that holds the muscle in the group, right? So these are different layers and these are the different functions of the muscles fiber or the structure, right? So what you see here is what we learned here is the structure of muscle fiber. So I'll not make this video too long. So this was it with the structure of muscle fiber. I hope you're liking my videos. If you're liking, do make sure to subscribe to my channel, and thank you for now.